If I close my eyes, I can ride the wind. I can coast the earth, rest ashore, and rise again. But I won't close my eyes till it's time
You know, a couple months ago I was on an airplane and I was reading a Time magazine and there was an ad in there by the Mobile Corporation. You've seen those, right? They take up about a half of a page, and they were talking about how we as a nation, and I would imagine this applies to most countries in the world, that we're making a terrible mistake by not exploiting our public lands. And they went on to talk about certain things, and there was one paragraph that really, of course, caught my eye, and it said, for instance, there is no reason why the oil industry shouldn't be allowed to go onto the coastal plain of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge in Alaska, because after all, we all know the petroleum industry has an impeccable environmental record in the Arctic. Now, is there anything that you can remember that's happened in the past 6 or 7 years that may cause you to doubt that?
Exxon Valdez.
Thank you. Because they're counting on the fact that you've forgotten that on March 25th, 1989, the Exxon Valdez ran aground on Bly Reef and spilled 11 million gallons of crude oil into Prince William Sound. But, you know, I have to say that the petroleum industry in the past 6 years has learned something. And you want to know what they've learned? Do you know how many oil spills, major oil spills, there have been in Prince William Sound since the Exxon Valdez? 6. Bringing the total amount of crude oil spilled in Prince William Sound in the past 6 years up to 13 million gallons. So what have they learned? They've learned how to not let us find out about it. You know, the oil industry won't acknowledge the oil spill that happened in Prince William Sound as an environmental problem. It is a transportation problem. How many of you guys in your schools, or when you were younger maybe, get Channel 1, right? Did you see that documentary that Exxon made? That we're sorry, and not only, and it was on Channel 1, and this was being fed to you guys, and kids that are younger than you right now. And you know, we're sorry, and we didn't mean to do it, and we'll never do it again. And besides, it really turned out to be a good thing. And you know why it turned out to be a good thing? Because the oil spill that killed hundreds of thousands of birds, thousands of otters, thousands of seals, bears, caribou, ruined people's lives, actually enhanced the process of natural selection. Isn't that wonderful? But you know what's really scary? What's really scary is we know about the Exxon Valdez. And since 1970, we've been keeping track of how much oil has been spilled in the oceans of the earth. And through the 70s, there were a bunch of bad spills then, and these are only the ones that have been reported, and major ones that are over 1,000 gallons. But in the 70s, there was a bunch spilled, and then the 80s, of course, there was the Exxon Valdez, and then in the 90s, we had that mess in the Persian Gulf. But between 1970 and now, there have been over 300 billion gallons of crude oil spilled in the oceans of the earth. Now, how many of you guys are biology students? What happens if you kill the oceans? Who's next? It's us. Well, you know, I went to Prudhoe Bay, and I'm not going to talk a long time about this. I went to Prudhoe Bay because that was part of my assignment, and I mean, I certainly saw the visual degradation of the environment that I expected. I mean, we would all expect to see that. I mean, Prudhoe Bay emits as much air pollution annually as does Washington, D.C. And I expected to see that. But what really bothered me about Prudhoe Bay was not so much what I saw, but what I felt. Because I felt hurt. Because I realized that all of my life I've been lied to. You know, these ads we see on television about how Chevron really cares. Well, what is it they care about? Right, it's green, and that's the only thing it has to do with the environment. But I saw Prudhoe Bay, and I left feeling terribly hurt. And I got back in this little toy airplane, float plane, and we flew 75 miles to the east and landed on a tundra pond on the coastal plain, and got out, and the minute I put my foot on the tundra, I realized that I was in a place as important as the Grand Canyon, or Yellowstone, or Yosemite. It has that kind of magic, and I wish there was a way that I could take us all there right now. And, I mean, I learned something from Molly last night, and I'm going to try this. First, I just want you to close your eyes. And let me just see if I can draw a mental picture for you. I mean, it's a tiny little piece of land. It's 125 miles wide, about 20 to 40 miles deep. The east is the Canadian border, Yukon Territory. The north is the Arctic Ocean. We're about 1,200 miles from the North Pole. And if we were all standing right there right now, and turned in a 360-degree circle, we would see caribou, moose, muskox, wolverines, porcupine, lemming, voles, foxes, wolves, grizzly bear, polar bear. One of the only places on Earth where polar bear den on land. And about 140 species of birds that do their nesting and staging there. It's the most incredible wildlife display I've ever seen. Now open your eyes and I'll tell you the alternative. There will be 7 large production facilities, 60 to 100 drill pads at several acres per pad, 4 airfields, 2 ports, 2 desalination plants, 100 miles of pipeline, 300 miles of roads, facilities for 5,000 or 6,000 workers, without disturbing anything, of course. It's the most incredible wilderness I've ever seen. It's pure wilderness. I mean, I want to just share a couple wildlife experiences. You heard in the slideshow. First of all, you remember that picture in the slideshow where there was thousands of caribou? It's about 70,000 caribou in that picture. And one morning, I woke up in the middle of that. And it was an awesome experience. One of the other, you know, we hear about caribou, we talk about caribou a lot, and it's certainly the predominant species there. But there are other species that are just as important, and I mentioned them. But I want to talk about a couple. One of them is mosquitoes. And, you know, we kind of laugh about mosquitoes, but I remember once I was in the village of Old Crow, and a couple paddlers from Europe came down the river, and they stopped, and we were sitting, I was talking to some of my friends, drinking tea, and these paddlers got out, and they said, "Oh, you have beautiful country, but isn't there anything you could do about the mosquitoes?" And my friend Kenneth looked at him and said, yeah, I suppose there is, but what are the ducks going to eat? But on the coastal plain, the mosquitoes are incredible. I mean, just to give you a sense, when I used to go out on the land with the Kochim people, we'd be sitting around a campfire, and they like to gamble, and we'd be playing this game, and on a given signal, everybody would go like this. And then we count. And one night, the record was 175 on both hands. Wow. And that's why it's so important that the caribou can get to the coast to have their calves, because the calves are born practically with no hair, and within a matter of a couple hours, the mosquitoes could drain them dry. And on the coast, it's cooler and windier, and the mosquitoes aren't quite so bad. So it's really important. The other species that I want to talk about for just a second, because it's so magnificent, is I want to share my first encounter with a grizzly bear. You ever had an encounter with some of you folks that live around here must have had it. Well, I'll never forget mine. I was backpacking and photographing in the Refuge, and I stopped by a river to have lunch, and after lunch I was washing out my plate, and I looked up, and about 75 feet from me, standing near the river, was this huge silver-maned grizzly bear standing on his back legs, looking at me. And we looked at each other for a minute. Been there, done that. And I realized, for the first time in my life, that I may not be at the top of the food chain. Which is quite a revelation. But I also realized that if that development takes place, then probably nobody else will ever have that experience. Because the first thing that happened when they developed Prudhoe Bay, the predators disappeared. The workers killed them for fun, they chased them away, they just couldn't stand the activity, but they disappeared. And what happens to a system when you take apart the food chain from the top? It falls apart. On the way out of the refuge, the pilot asked me if I'd be interested in stopping in a native village, so we stopped in this village called Arctic Village, Alaska, which is a very remote village. The only way to get there is really by air, or about a 3-week-long river trip that I highly recommend. And we stopped in this village, and it's a village of the Kochim people. They are a transboundary nation, and their villages surround the Arctic Refuge on both sides of the Alaska-Canada border. And these folks are really concerned about this issue, because they depend for the major portion of their food supply from the porcupine caribou herd and the other wildlife resources that use the coastal plain as their nursery. And so we stopped in Arctic Village, and it so happens on that particular day, there was to be a congressional field hearing. Our Congress people were coming to Arctic Village, and the Kochim people were sending their representatives from all their villages in Alaska and Canada so they could present their concerns. Well, the first person to testify was an elder from the village of Old Crow in the Yukon, a man named Alfred Charley. Alfred got up and gave a 12-minute speech in his own language. The next person that got up was a younger leader from Old Crow, a man named Stanley and Jutley, who got 6 minutes into the translation of Alfred's speech, and the chairperson stood up and said, "We got to be back in Fairbanks in an hour and a half. Thank you all for coming. Have a nice day." That was it. A 30,000-year-old native culture had 18 minutes to defend itself. For me, it was the most embarrassing and humiliating moment I've ever had. But when I stopped and I thought about it, it's no surprise. 500 years ago, Cortez and Pizarro swept across Central and South America and wiped out the Aztecs and the Incas. That's because we needed the gold. And then 150 years ago, we swept across the Great Plains, right here, slaughtered the buffalo, displaced the native people. That's because we needed the land. And now here we are, 150 years later, and we're getting ready to do it again. This time because we need the oil. I walked up to another leader from Old Crow, a woman named Norma Cassie. And I asked her if I could take her picture, and she spun around and said, "Yeah, you can take my picture, but what difference does it make? You'll just go home and forget about it like everybody else." She said, if you really cared, you'd come to my village, Old Crow in the Yukon, and you'd see why this issue is so important to us. So I did. I went to Old Crow, and I spent about 2.5 weeks there the first summer, and then most of the 4 months of the following summer. And I can't describe what my relationship with those people has meant to me personally. You know, we all think that we have a sense of land and a sense of belonging to the earth, but they gave me a great gift because they really taught me how connected I am to the earth. And I can only describe that by just telling you one little story. I was camped by the river in Old Crow, the Porcupine River, and a couple guys from the village came to get me, and they said, Lenny, we're going to go caribou hunting for a couple days upriver. You want to go with us? Well, I mean, that's a photographer's dream. So I went back down to my tent, and I got my, camera gear, and my peanut butter, my jelly, and my granola, and all the other politically correct food I had. I came back down to the river, and they looked at me and laughed, like they looked at me and laughed a lot, and said, where are you going with all that? I said, well, I'm going camping with you guys. They said, well, you don't need that. I said, well, what should I bring? They said, bring a knife and a salt shaker. Well, I'm just a Jewish boy from Seattle, and I don't know about that. But I trusted them, and we went out on the land, and it was incredible. We were out there for 10 days, and the land gave us everything we needed. We had caribou, we had moose, we had muskrat. Anybody here ever eat muskrat? Yeah, I know. Well, from my perspective, it's an acquired taste, which I haven't acquired yet, but I'm working on it. We had cranberries, we had blueberries, we had salmon berries, we had grayling, this great little fish that you catch in the creeks and rivers there that tastes like it comes when you fry it. It tastes like it comes with butter and garlic in it. But the land gave us everything we needed. And all during this process, we'd be going through the bush, and they'd stop me and they'd say, Lenny, do you see why you have to take care of the earth? I'd say, yeah, I said, if you take care of the earth takes care of you. And we all understand that. Everybody understands that. But what bothered me about it was, how come they know that? And we got to come to conferences, we got to go to college, we got to join the Sierra Club, we got to join Sikh, we got to do all those things, and they know that. And it really bothered me, and I think one day, just to shut me up, one of the elders sat me down and said, what are you going to do when you leave here? So I'm going to go home, go to work. He said, so you work? Yeah. He said, you make money? I said, yeah, I work and I make money. He said, so you work, you make money? He said, do you worry about money? I said, of course. Everybody worries about money. He said, so you work, you make money, and you worry about money. I said, yeah, that's pretty much it. He said, well, up here things are a little bit different. He says, we get everything we need from the earth, and we worry about the earth. And that's when I realized that these folks have been environmentalists for thousands of years. And not because it's a fad or a trend, because it's really necessary for survival. You remember in the slideshow, there was a man talking very eloquently about being patient, kind, having respect, having good reason for all of your movements. Well, that is one of the people on earth that I respect the most. He's taught me a lot. His name is Randall Tetlichi. And I think one of the biggest honors that I've been accorded in my life is that Randall and Mabel Tetlichi, I think that the things that are most important in their life are their 3 children. And one of them, you kind of heard screaming and yelling in the slideshow because when I made it, he was 9 years old. But what I'm so honored about is this issue is so important to them, and they're so concerned about it, that they have sent their son and trusted him to me to travel around this crazy country for 3 weeks to say how concerned he is. And his name is Vincent Tetlichi, and he's with us today. Now, imagine this. 3 or 4 days ago, Vincent was an old crow, and now he's here. And I'm assuming this is probably the first time that he's spoken to a group this large or a group like this. So make him feel welcome, make him feel at home, because he is. I'd like to introduce you to Mike.